What's up, PGF Nation? We've got a huge show today because two blockbuster NFL trades just shook up the league. Myles Garrett is heading to the Rams. A.J. Brown is heading to the Patriots. And while the A.J. Brown move felt like it had been building for months, I don't think anybody saw this Myles Garrett trade coming. These aren't just headline-grabbing trades. These are franchise-altering moves that I think could really reshape the future of these teams. I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. Alex, this is definitely not the episode we planned on recording this week, but look, when news like this drops, you throw the rundown out the window and you start talking about it because these are the kind of moves that can change the direction of these franchises overnight.
Yeah, so let's look at the deal for the first part. So for the most part, the Rams get Myles Garrett. Now, what the Browns get is Jared Verse, a first-round pick in 2027, a second-round pick in 28, and a third-round pick in 2029. Now, we expect the Rams to be good for next year's draft pick and then perhaps 28th draft pick because Matthew Stafford only signed through 2027, so we'll have to see. And then they get a third-round pick in 2029, but they also get Jared Verse. And
huge. It's
going to be interesting. I think it's huge, but I also think it's going to be interesting because Jared Verse is a 3-4 linebacker, and the Browns play a 4-3 defensive front. They play more of a 3-4 hybrid type where he's always a stand-up outside linebacker. He's more TJ Watt than he is Myles Garrett. So it'll be interesting to see how the Browns use Jared Verse in this defense.
Jared Verse, I think stylistically kind of reminds me of Khalil Mack. Is kind of the player I see when I look at Jared Verse, right? When you think about Khalil Mack, you think of like the physical power rusher, right? Like these are two different types of rushers. Like Myles Garrett definitely has power, don't get me wrong, but he's more of a speed rusher, can just annihilate guys with his quickness, where Jared Verse is an edge setter, a physical tone setter, a guy who really just bullies tackles and pushes the pocket with his physicality. And so I think he fits really, let's put it this way, I think he has the versatility to really play in any one of these hybrid fronts, right? I think he's just fine in a 4-3 or a 3-4 because of his versatility. He's definitely a guy that has those traits for a lot of these hybrid type defenses that we see now. So I think stylistically, it's going to be a really good fit for what they want to do. Look, you hit on it, though. The compensation is massive for this trade. Now, we'll get into the Rams getting a great player, a generational player, right? A Hall of Fame gold jacket guy, no doubt about it. But I really like what Cleveland got in return here because getting a guy like Jared Verse, this is a guy who's only been 2 years in the league and is an ascending young player. And I think in a lot of ways, Alex, I think a little bit underrated nationally. I don't think a lot of people realize just how sneaky good Jared Verse has been these last couple of years. This is the Rams' best defensive player. I mean, let's not overlook that here. Like, I know they upgraded with Myles Garrett, and I get that, but they gave away their best young defensive player in this trade. So Cleveland gets him and, like you mentioned, a 2027 first-round pick. Now, granted, the Rams are expected to be good. They're a Super Bowl favorite, so you're probably getting a late first-round pick. I get that, but it's still a first-round pick in a loaded 27 draft class. And then, like you mentioned, a 28 second-round pick and a 29 third-round pick. That's a haul, man. That's a haul. I mean, look, you should get a haul when you move a great player like Myles Garrett, but I want to applaud Andrew Berry here.
Yeah, absolutely.
For really getting a heck of a deal here for this Cleveland team in return for a great player.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree to what we've seen from Andrew Berry here. I mean, he hit on basically all his draft picks last year. He looks to have another great crop of rookies coming in this year, and then to make a move like this to get a pick in 27, 28, and 29, and then to get another up and coming, or actually, I guess you could play around and say another top 10 pass rusher in Jared Verse. Yeah. I mean, that's
who's 25.
Who's 25. And what they did with the trade was, so they're only taking on about $30 million in dead money split over 2 years by trading him after June 1st. So that's another big key, because had they traded him before, they would have taken on about, I think, $88 million had they traded him before. But they only taken on about maybe $35 million in the cap hit for the next 2 years. They haven't signed Jared Verse. They got rid of Myles Garrett in the first year. I think it's the first year of this deal that he just signed. So now they can look forward. Now, if they could simply find a quarterback, but we'll save that for another conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're right. The timeline for Myles Garrett and this Browns rebuild didn't match up anymore. You have a defensive player of the year, a great player in the prime of his career on a roster that is in full-blown rebuild, trying to get younger, trying to get cheaper, and that doesn't really align with where Myles Garrett is in his career. It does align with where the Rams want to be, which is in the Super Bowl, and a team that makes an aggressive move to try to get over the hump. So I think this deal makes sense for both teams. It really does. But I want to touch on something you mentioned here because you hit on it, and I know you're the money guy on this podcast, Alex, but I want to mention it because Andrew Berry waiting until June 1st, I think was really, really smart because you're right. It allows Cleveland to spread that dead money across, or that dead money hit, I should say, across 2 seasons. And so by 2028, the books are going to be clean and the Browns are going to have substantial cap flexibility moving forward after that point. So this really works with this rebuild timeline, to your point. And the quarterback conversation, we'll leave that for another day. We know that's more of a 2027 draft topic, more than likely, right? To be fair to Shador and some of these other guys, maybe one of these guys pops, but more than likely we're talking about that. But once again, you just added another 27 first rounder. So that gives you some more ammunition if you need to go up and get a guy. You have another trade piece here to go get your quarterback of the future possibly. So once again, another huge feather in the cap for Andrew Berry in this trade here. I mean, but let's shift this here to the Rams for a second, because if you're the Rams, like I said, this is an all-in move. This is an aggressive move for the Rams because they gave up a lot to go get this guy. You're already a Super Bowl level roster. You've already made aggressive moves to go get a guy like Trent McDuffie and upgrade your defense in that way. Now you get the best defensive player in the league coming off of a career season in the peak of his powers to add to this roster. The only way I see this backfiring for the Rams here is if Matthew Stafford, if the health or the age catch up to him quicker than we expect, right? Because we know last year there was already some talks. If you remember going into training camp, there was a talk about the back, and obviously he held up just fine and had a great season, an MVP level season, and maybe he still has a couple more of those left. But this could derail quickly, really based a lot on Matthew Stafford. I mean, let's face it, if he doesn't stay healthy and playing at a high level, if his, like I said, the age and the injuries catch up to him here, this could really backfire on the Rams here. And I think it could actually end up being something that kind of hinders them because that championship window might just close faster than expected. And now suddenly you've sacrificed a young cornerstone player and multiple draft assets for maybe a shorter window than expected. That's the one risk here for the Rams, giving up all that capital and giving up such a good young player like Verse.
So let's look at it. Let's talk about the money first. Let's go back to the money really quick. So essentially, the Rams have set themselves up for victory really quick. They have this year and they have next year with Matthew Stafford. We'll talk about it, health aside for Matthew Stafford, but they have him for those 2 years. And then his big money comes into play because he's only making about maybe 15 to 20 million this year and next year. Then
you talking about Stafford's money?
No, I'm talking about Myles Garrett's money.
Oh, you're talking about Myles Garrett. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So Myles Garrett money jumps to about $50 million for the next 2 years in 28 and 29. However, if the Rams feel that, let's say McVay's like, okay, Stafford's done, I'm done. So he retires. They can then move Myles Garrett and move that money off of their books and go into another direction. So it looks like they have him for I think it was like $100 million or $174 million, I believe. But it's really only 2 to 3 years at $90 million that they have him for before they can get rid of him and then go in and then put their money in a different direction. So the Rams, even though they gave up a lot and they traded for Myles Garrett, they traded for him, but they have 2 years of wiggle room to figure out what, and I'm just using Matthew Stafford since he's the quarterback, what Matthew Stafford is going to do. Then you look at what McVay is going to do. Then they can decide what they're going to do with Myles Garrett, because They can move him in 29 before his salary hits the big time. They could then move him in 2 years in the 2029 season and say, yeah, we don't want to deal with that salary. We're going to turn our attention in a different direction.
Yeah, it lines up with their window for sure. I mean, the whole thing lines up. And once again, the trade also makes sense financially from the standpoint of what you're talking about was you're getting Garrett, who's already under contract. It wasn't like you were bringing in a guy who was about to be due for a big payday. He's already under contract because of that extension that he signed with the Browns. So that deal is already in place, which really helped make this move possible. Let's put it this way, because once again, back to this timeline for the Rams, they're looking at this as basically about a 2 or 3 year window here. And I get it, because you have that kind of window that you're hoping to capitalize on a Super Bowl run or possibly multiple Super Bowl runs, obviously. But I think the Rams look at this, if they get, let's say, 3 elite seasons from Garrett, and they bring home a Lombardi trophy in that run, then this trade is an absolute home run. I mean, they'll look back and say, look, it was worth every penny. But once again, I just wanted to point out that there is some risk here, just because we know how important the quarterback position is. And we know that if Stafford isn't playing at a high level, whether it's due to age or injuries catching up, like I mentioned, all of a sudden this window could close quickly, and this could backfire because of the assets they gave up. That's why this is so fascinating, Alex. I mean, we rarely ever see a player of this caliber get traded in the middle of their prime. Like, we've seen guys get traded a little before their prime, and then all of a sudden they blow up, right? Like Marshall Faulk got traded, and then he kind of blew up once he got to the Rams.
To the Rams, yeah.
Right. You know, we saw guys like Brett Favre get traded and then become a superstar. We rarely see guys who are like at the peak of their powers at an MVP level, I guess in this case, DPOY level of player, getting traded when they're right in the heart of their prime. This is just rare air. You just don't see this very often in the NFL, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense for both teams, man. I really do. And, you know, I've heard some chatter, and I know it's Twitter and you got to take it with a grain of salt, but I feel like there's a lot of people underselling what the Browns got in this deal, because I actually think this is a good move for them. I really do. I know you're losing a premier player. I get it. But to be able to get that kind of draft capital back and an elite young player like Jared Verse, it is real. I think it was just an unbelievable move by Andrew Berry. I do. I mean, I started digging into the numbers because I wanted to see, because I've always thought, I think people are underselling Verse here. His first 2 seasons in the NFL, this guy has posted a 17% pressure rate. And just to put that in context, Myles Garrett's pressure rate over the last 2 years has been 17.8. So I know Myles Garrett's sack numbers are much better. I get that. Myles Garrett's been able to get home a lot more than Verse. But Verse is still a guy that puts a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. And once again, this is a guy who's only 2 years into his career. And for context, if you look at Jared Verse, his first 2 seasons, his pressure rate is better than Myles Garrett in his first 2 seasons. So this is a guy that, once again, I think is an ascending player here. The only defensive linemen with higher pressure rates for their first 2 seasons, just to put this in context, the only players higher were Micah Parsons, Von Miller, and Nick Bosa. That's it. That's the only guys that have had a higher pressure rate their first 2 years than Jared Verse. That's pretty elite company. So once again, I think we want to see him convert some of those pressures into sacks, kind of put his name in the discussion of the elite edge rushers. But he's a good player, man. He's only 2 years into a rookie contract. And I just think that's why this deal makes so much sense for this young Cleveland team, trying to figure out the next version of their roster, adding Verse, adding premium draft capital, giving themselves a younger foundation to build around. They fleeced the Jaguars in that trade the year prior. Now they've got this young defensive line starting to come together. They've got some good young defensive players. They've got some young, intriguing playmakers on offense. This team might just be building something here for when that quarterback arrives. And I've got to be kind of excited here for the Cleveland Browns. If I'm a Browns fan, I'm a little excited about the direction of this team. I really am. Quick shout out to our friends at props.cash, the best player prop research tool in the game. Props.cash lets you scan thousands of props across sports books to quickly spot the highest value opportunities. You get real-time injury and lineup intel, advanced filters to find exactly what you're looking for, and even correlated player props so you can see what tends to hit when a player goes over their line. They cover NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college football, college basketball, and the WNBA. It's legit next level prep. If you're serious about betting smarter, go to props.cash and use code PGF25 for 25% off your first month. That's code PGF25 for 25% off your first month at props.cash. The official ticketing app of Pint Glass Football is now SeatGeek. I can't recommend them enough, guys. I've been using SeatGeek for years. You want to go to a game this season? SeatGeek is here to take the confusion out of buying tickets, making sure you get the best seats at the best prices. With SeatGeek, you'll never have to worry about overpaying for tickets again. How? They put a 0 to 10 score on each ticket, so you know you're getting a good deal. But here's the real game changer. You can get $20 off your first ticket purchase with the code PGFPOD. That's right, $20 off with code PGFPOD. This season, make every game day epic with SeatGeek. Download the SeatGeek app and remember to enter the code PGFPOD to grab your $20 discount.
Yeah, and just to put a wrap on this, with a team like Cleveland, and it's at you're 1,000% correct on his pressure rate. With a team, since Myles Garrett's been there, they've been a losing team with the exception of 1 year, maybe another year, but I think exception of 1 year. It'll be interesting to see what the pressure stats will be for Verse in Cleveland and for Myles in a perennial Super Bowl, not just a playoff, but a perennial Super Bowl situation to see how he performs. I'm interested to watch those stats because I think his pressure rates have something to do with Cleveland not being in the playoffs and people just not caring, like, we're going to beat the Browns, so whatever. We'll block them. We'll double team them and everything, but we're not going to lose the Cleveland, so we'll deal with it how we have to deal with it. But either way, it'll be interesting to watch, so I can't wait to see what happens there.
No, you're right. Before we shift gears, I do want to piggyback off that thought because there are some good players around these guys now. It's going to be interesting to see, how this young defensive line for the Browns responds with the new player, and then also how a guy like Braden Fisk and some of these other guys in LA, how did they respond having a guy like Myles Garrett and the kind of attention he draws? It's going to be really, really fascinating, man, because look, I think the Rams, I applaud them for being aggressive, for pushing their chips into the middle, for this win now move. But I think quietly Cleveland might have gotten the better long-term package here. So this is going to be a fascinating move to track, not just next season, but for the next 2 or 3 years, kind of looking back on this trade and kind of seeing how it plays out for this team is going to be really, really interesting.
You know what? And I hate that we keep going back and forth because we keep saying we're going to move on. The last thing that I want to say about this, and it's something that nobody's really talked about, at least that I've heard. I haven't heard too many podcasts talk about this. How does Jared Verse feel about going from LA, the top of the mountain, down, not to the middle, but all the way down to the bottom of the market? Now, we know Cleveland's building, but he's coming from the top of the mountain and he's going all the way down to the bottom. I wonder how he's gonna feel mentally when he gets to Cleveland after being in LA where, it's Hollywood, it's everything, and now he's going to Cleveland. It's going to be interesting to see how he does mentally.
Yeah, to your point on that is fascinating because Jared Verse, I was listening to some insiders today talking about this trade, mentioning how Jared Verse is beloved in that Rams locker room. He also, like I mentioned a minute ago, he plays alongside his college teammate, Braden Fisk. So this is a guy who's got some deep roots. For a guy who's only been there 2 years, he's really got some roots in that LA locker room and in that facility. It's going to be interesting, man. You're right. Because I think now if you're Jared Verse, is this going to motivate you, right? Is this going to be like a chip on the shoulder? Like, you guys traded away me? You guys traded away me, a 25-year-old ascending edge player? Like, if I'm him, it almost feels like he's got something to prove now. So this could be a big year for him. I'm going to be interested to see that too, Alex. I think it's a great point. Let's get to the other big trade here. And look, we kind of saw this one coming. This was a move that I think a lot of us expected. We were all kind of just waiting for that June 1st date for this, to become finalized. But it doesn't change the fact that it's a big move. And I think it's kind of living in the shadow now of this Myles Garrett move, which obviously was huge. But needless to say, this is a big move for the Patriots. It's a fascinating move for the Eagles. And I'm curious to get your thoughts here, because the Patriots land A.J. Brown, like I said, after months of speculation. The compensation here is pretty straightforward. New England gets A.J. Brown. The Eagles get a 2028 first-round pick and the better of New England's 2 fifth-round picks in 2027. What's interesting about this deal is the timing mattered almost as much as the compensation, because, like I said, waiting until June 1st, Philadelphia can now split a massive dead cap charge across 2 seasons instead of absorbing a $43.3 million cap hit in 2026. I think that flexibility clearly played a role in getting this deal done here. What do you think about the money side of this, the compensation side, before we get into the players on the field?
So I like the money side of it. I mean, and I think, and I guess the Eagles got, a good pick for it. I guess the first round in 2028. I looked like they were adamant on keeping their 2027 pick, and they traded, I believe, a 5th round in 27 and kept their their first through 4th round picks in 27. So I thought it was excellent. I think the money works fine. And New England's not really paying anybody. And if I'm not mistaken, they did have a lot to spend on free agency. What was that, 2 years ago, or last offseason? Yeah, last offseason they had a lot to spend, but they're still 5th in cap space right now at $37 million. So I think they did great with the money.
Yeah, I think so too. And this is part of the luxury of hitting on a young quarterback in the draft, because you've got this young quarterback who was, in the MVP running last year, makes an unexpected run all the way to the Super Bowl. So you've got this young quarterback that, by all accounts, looks like the franchise quarterback going forward, and you're not paying them like one yet. So this is the kind of window where you can get a little more aggressive and spend some money on some big name players to try to boost this roster up around him. And I bring up Drake Maye specifically because, this is going to be a big time weapon for Drake Maye. I mean, bringing in a guy like this, I think, really could boost his stock as a quarterback. And we know A.J. Brown reunites with Mike Vrabel, who coached him in Tennessee. So obviously there's a relationship there. There's some familiarity there. I think from Philadelphia's perspective, the move wasn't completely surprising. There was a lot of public frustration, social media outbursts, and a lot of reports about tension regarding his role in the offense. I think there was a lot of smoke around this, right? And I think we kind of saw this coming because of that. And I think the Eagles, with the Mekhi Lemon draft pick and going and adding some wide receivers to this roster, I think once they got the compensation that they wanted, I think that became, okay, look, we're where we want to be reshaping this roster. We're willing to move this guy and move on. New England, like I said, I just think this is a big move for Drake Maye. They finally have a true number 1 receiver. I think A.J. Brown is exactly the kind of player who can really change how defenses play you. He's physical. He wins contested catches. He dominates in slants and intermediate routes, which is something Drake Maye is really good at. And I just think it's a guy that defensive coordinators are going to have to account for on every snap. And I think that's going to help open things up for the rest of this offense and hopefully take Drake Maye's play to another level next year.
So here's the thing that I'll mention, and I won't get too thoroughly deep into it. If you want to know more, go check your Twitter spaces, your Instagrams or whatever, but it's going to be interesting how this player, and this is off the field stuff mentally that he works with, everything that actually happened in Philly. But if you want to know more about that, go check your Twitter, your Instagram. You'll find out what I'm talking about. So that's actually going to be number 1. Number 2 is, I do believe, with a guy like Josh McDaniels, I'm pretty sure he's somewhere looking for that Randy Moss playbook that he had. Not saying that he's going to be Moss. I'm saying they're looking for those type of plays because they have a lot of wide receivers. They have Kayshon Boutte, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, caught 700 yards worth of receiving yards last year. So they have A.J. Brown, they have Romeo Doubs, they have Kayshon Boutte, they have Kyle Williams, they have Demario They have Demario Douglas. Oh, and they also have Mac Hollins. So they run 6 deep with these wide receivers. And let's not forget Travion Henderson coming back for his second season. Hopefully he's learned to pass block and can get on the field some more. And they also picked up Elijah Vera Tucker. Let's also not forget Hunter Henry. But he's going to have a lot of time to see the field, to pass off for runs, to dump down to Hunter Henry, to go to Romeo Doubs, to go to A.J. Brown. He's there. Josh McDaniels should have a lot of fun coming up with plays to run in this offense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think to your point about the receiver room, they have a lot of depth at receiver and they have a lot of good players. It was just a lot of 2s and 3s though.
Yeah.
And this was kind of the missing piece. Like they needed a big true X receiver. They go and get one. I think the Romeo Doubs acquisition was a little under the radar. He's a good player, man. And I think now you pair him with A.J. Brown, and this receiver room has elevated overnight. Now you can kind of put those other guys in line. Like I said, a lot of these guys kind of settle into that 3-4-5 role, and now you've got a nice rounded out wide receiver room for this quarterback. So I think it's a great move, and I think to your point about McDaniels and kind of dusting off the old playbook, I like your thought process here because, yeah, okay, we know he's not Randy Moss, but he can do a lot of those Mosk-esque type routes, right? He can take the top off of defense. He can be a home run hitter for you. He's a guy that can make big plays in space. So once again, and also just a big red zone threat. I think this is going to be a move that could really pay off well. I think A.J. Brown was clearly a guy that was probably ready for a change of scenery anyway. And by all accounts, I know there was a lot of off the field kind of noise and, a lot of talk about being a diva and this and that. I had seen a lot of reports that for the most part, a lot of his teammates actually really like A.J. Brown. And once again, you're bringing him in with a coach who already has a relationship with him.
Yeah.
I'd be kind of surprised if this doesn't work, at least in the short term. Now, look, maybe 3 years from now, he's reading books on the sideline and it's a whole, story in New England again. But I think right now, this looks like a deal that could really pay off for this Patriots team, trying to take the next step, especially offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get out of here, Brad, I saw a few guys get signed. Devin A-Chain signed a 4-year extension. Jack Campbell from the Detroit Lions signed another 4-year extension. The Falcon, Drake London with the Falcons signed a 4-year, $150 million. That's one of the bigger deals out there. And the Giants, they signed Juju Smith-Schuster, but they also signed Odell Beckham Jr. Now, this is a guy that's kind of, and we don't have to have a whole flash out about this, but this is a guy that's been in and out of every single team since he was moved from the Giants to the Browns, to the Rams, to Miami, wherever else he might have gone in between, and
Baltimore,
to the Ravens, Baltimore, the Ravens as well. He's kind of been in and out of every. It'll be interesting if he can stay healthy, have a solid season for the Giants, and kind of rewrite the script and walk off into the sunset, because he's only going to get 1 year. This will be his only year deal, and then he's going to be gone.
Yeah, I think, bringing in those two players in particular for the Giants, Juju Smith-Schuster, that one obviously makes a lot of sense because you bring over Matt Nagy to be the OC, had several years as the offense coordinator for the Chiefs with Juju Smith-Schuster, so there's a lot of familiarity there, a veteran guy who's going to come in, he's going to know the playbook, he's a good blocker, he's a good teammate, he's a hard worker, just checks a lot of boxes for the type of veteran player that you want to bring in for a young quarterback, a reliable receiver. Odell Beckham Jr., at this point, like you said, you're kind of just taking a flyer on a guy to maybe add some depth to this lineup because right now, unfortunately, there's some reports that it's not looking good for Malik Neighbors, which is really unfortunate for Giants fans because we saw this guy his rookie year really flash and look like, man, they might have got something here with this guy. Obviously, has the ACL injury and apparently is needing another surgery. The recovery is looking kind of iffy right now. And I think these guys, adding some of these players is a little bit of an insurance plan for a team that's probably a little bit worried about at least the short-term outlook for Malik Neighbors, hopefully not the long-term outlook, but at least for this season, it looks like maybe he's not quite on track to be a playmaker for them this year. So, adding some guys like that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, fingers crossed for a guy like Malik Neighbors. Hopefully this doesn't become his story injury-wise.
And if it does, a lot of you, this is people for all, you know who you are. I told you all he was not gonna last. I told you all this. But hopefully he does last. He can get back on the field. I don't want anybody to get hurt, but hopefully he can come back.
Any of those last deals that you mentioned, Is there any deals that really jump out to you? I know you just kind of mentioned them briefly. Is there any deals? I like the Drake London deal. Good young player. No problem paying him. Devon A-Chain. Wow. What a steal he's been. 3rd round pick out of Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken. And look, I'm just going to say, guys, we're going to take a victory lap on this. We really liked this guy coming out of Texas A&M. If you guys remember, I said he's one of my favorite players in the mid rounds. Devon A-Chain has turned into one heck of a running back. I'm happy to see him get his money for a Miami team that's in a clear rebuild. But look, they're saying this is a guy that we think for the next few years should be a part of this rebuild. Any of those deals jump out to you? Anything you like, don't like, or?
No, I can actually say I like what the Lions did with Jack Campbell. I love what Miami did with Devon A-Chain, and I liked what Drake London got, and I even liked the 1-year extension for Matthew Stafford. And I guess you could say I also like them bringing in Juju and giving a 1-year run for Odell Beckham. I like that as well.
Yeah, no, I do too. I think all these deals make sense. I don't think they overpaid for any of them. They're all guys that I think are guys that you're looking to build around, at least in the short term, and some of these guys for the long term. I just took a victory lap on Devon A-Chain. Well, Alex, we're going to get dunked on for this one because we crushed the Jack Campbell pick. If you remember, we crushed them. We crushed the Detroit Lions for the Jack Campbell pick when he came out of Iowa in the first round, and we said, what? They took who in the first round? And we crushed them for that pick. And look, we take victory laps when we win, but I'm not afraid to say, look, we got dunked on with that one, Alex, because, man, what a player he's turned out to be. At the time, it felt crazy. Taking a middle linebacker that most people thought was a late second round grade, taking him in the middle of the first round, it just seemed like a reach at the time, but they knew what they were doing. So hats off to them. He has been a staple for that defense, and I'm happy to see him get an extension. Guys, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button or that follow button so you don't miss any future episodes. I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football, and we'll catch you next time.